The shadow of a cross stretches across barren ground. The year is AD 33. Outside the walls of Jerusalem, on a hill called Golgotha, 3 men hang dying. But the words spoken by the man on the center cross will echo through eternity. This isn't just a story of suffering. It's a masterpiece of theology spoken in humanity's darkest hour. 7 phrases that reveal the heart of God, the nature of forgiveness, and the completion of salvation itself. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Picture the scene. Roman soldiers have just driven 9-inch nails through his wrists and feet. The crowd below mocks him mercilessly. Religious leaders he once called friends now celebrate his agony. And his first words? Not a curse, not a cry for vengeance, forgiveness. In Jewish culture, the victim of injustice was expected to call down God's wrath upon their oppressors. David cursed his enemies in the Psalms. The prophets called for divine judgment on Israel's tormentors. But Jesus breaks this pattern entirely. Instead of invoking Deuteronomy's eye for an eye justice, he embodies his own revolutionary teaching. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. The phrase, "they do not know what they are doing," isn't making excuses for evil. It's recognizing a profound spiritual truth. The soldiers thought they were simply executing another criminal. The crowd believed they were eliminating a troublemaker. The religious leaders assumed they were protecting orthodoxy. None realized they were crucifying the Son of God. This first word establishes the theological foundation for everything that follows. Calvary isn't about divine punishment. It's about divine love triumphing over human ignorance and evil. Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. To his right hangs a thief, probably guilty of robbery or insurrection against Rome. This man's entire recorded theology consists of a single statement. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. No elaborate confession, no promise to reform, no religious ritual, just recognition of who Jesus really is. The criminal's faith is remarkable. While disciples fled and crowds mocked, this dying thief sees what others miss, that the bloodied, gasping man beside him is indeed a king. But Jesus' response is even more stunning. Today you will be with me in paradise. The word paradise comes from Persian, describing the walled garden of a king where only honored guests were admitted. Jewish literature used it to describe the immediate presence of God after death. Jesus isn't promising distant future resurrection. He's offering immediate entrance into God's presence. This exchange demolishes religious systems based on works and merit. The thief performed no good deeds, completed no sacraments, made no restitution for his crimes. Yet he receives the same promise given to the most faithful disciples, grace in its purest form. Woman, here is your son. Son, here is your mother. Even while dying, Jesus notices his mother's anguish. Mary had watched her son grow from a carpenter's boy to a controversial rabbi. She had treasured his words in her heart, pondered his identity, followed him through ministry. Now, she watches him die as a criminal. In first-century Palestine, a widow without sons faced economic disaster. Jesus' brothers, mentioned in the Gospels, apparently weren't yet believers. So Jesus entrusts Mary's care to John, the beloved disciple, creating a new family bond that transcends blood relationships. But there's deeper symbolism here. Throughout his ministry, Jesus had redefined family. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother. Now, from the cross, he's modeling this new understanding. The community of faith becomes the family of choice. This moment also fulfills the prophecy Simeon had spoken when Jesus was an infant. A sword will pierce your own soul too. Mary's heart was indeed pierced as she watched her son's execution. Yet even in her grief, she becomes part of the emerging church community. My God, why have you forsaken me? These are perhaps the most troubling words Jesus ever spoke. After hours of confident trust, he suddenly cries out in apparent despair. Some witnesses thought he was calling for Elijah. Others dismissed it as delirium. But this was neither confusion nor defeat. It was profound theology. Jesus is quoting Psalm 22:1, a messianic psalm that begins in anguish but ends in triumph. Any Jew hearing these words would know the entire psalm, including its conclusion. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, "He has done it." By invoking this psalm, Jesus is simultaneously expressing genuine human agony and declaring his messianic identity. The psalm describes crucifixion details centuries before the practice existed. "They pierce my hands and my feet. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." This cry also reveals the theological mystery of the cross. For the first time in eternity, the intimate fellowship between Father and Son is broken as Jesus bears the full weight of human sin. God cannot look upon sin, so in becoming sin for us, Jesus experiences true forsakenness. "I am thirsty." After hours of theological profundity, Jesus makes his most human statement. He's thirsty. The word in Greek suggests not just dry mouth, but desperate, life-threatening dehydration. Crucifixion kills partially through fluid loss, and Jesus' body is shutting down. This simple phrase fulfills another messianic prophecy from Psalm 69:21. "They put gall in my food and gave me vinegar for my thirst." But it also reveals the full humanity of Jesus. The Word who became flesh experienced every aspect of human limitation, including the basic physical need for water. Someone offered him sour wine, the cheap drink of laborers and soldiers. It was a small mercy in an act of ultimate cruelty. Yet even this detail emphasizes that Jesus chose to experience complete human vulnerability. The irony is profound. The one who had offered living water to the Samaritan woman, who had promised that whoever drinks from him will never thirst, now thirsts himself. The Creator of all water cries out in desperate need. "It is finished." In Greek, this is one word, tetelestai. It was used by merchants to mark bills as paid in full, by artists to sign completed masterpieces, by servants to report mission accomplished. Jesus isn't saying, "I am finished." He's declaring, "It is finished." What exactly is finished? The work of salvation, the sacrificial system that required endless animal offerings, the separation between God and humanity, the power of sin and death, the requirements of the law that no human could fulfill. For centuries, the temple in Jerusalem had operated on a system of incompleteness. Daily sacrifices, annual atonement, ongoing ritual purification. It never ended because animal blood could never truly remove sin. But now, the perfect sacrifice has been offered once for all time. The moment Jesus spoke these words, the temple curtain tore from top to bottom, symbolizing that the way into God's presence was now open to everyone. The exclusive priesthood was ended. The dividing wall between Jew and Gentile was demolished. Archaeologists have found ancient receipts marked with tetelestai. When Jesus used this word, he was stamping humanity's debt to divine justice as eternally paid in full. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Jesus' final words return to intimate relationship with the Father. The cry of abandonment has passed. The work is complete. Now comes voluntary surrender. He's quoting Psalm 31:5, a prayer of trust that Jewish children learned at their mother's knees. The word commit suggests a deliberate deposit, like placing valuables in a trusted bank. Jesus isn't having his life taken, he's giving it freely. This fulfills his earlier declaration, "No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord." Luke's gospel adds a crucial detail. When Jesus had cried out, he breathed his last. The verb suggests a loud, triumphant shout, not a weak whisper. Death didn't defeat Jesus. He conquered death by embracing it voluntarily. The centurion supervising the execution, a hardened Roman soldier who had witnessed countless crucifixions, declared, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Something about Jesus' death, particularly these final words, convinced even his executioner that this was no ordinary criminal. These 7 last words have shaped Western civilization for 2 millennia. They've inspired countless works of art, music, and literature. Haydn's 7 Last Words of Christ remains one of classical music's masterpieces. Caravaggio's crucifixion paintings capture their emotional intensity. Poets from Donne to Eliot have wrestled with their meaning. But beyond artistic inspiration, these words continue to offer hope to the dying, comfort to the grieving, and forgiveness to the guilty. They speak to universal human experiences: the need for mercy, the longing for belonging, the fear of abandonment, the reality of physical suffering, the desire for completion, and the necessity of surrender. Each phrase reveals a different aspect of the human condition and God's response to it. Together, they form a complete theology of redemption spoken from the cross itself. Perhaps most remarkably, these weren't prepared speeches or carefully crafted sermons. They were the spontaneous words of a man experiencing the worst possible form of execution, yet they contain some of the most profound theological insights ever recorded. The cross that was intended to silence Jesus forever became the platform for his most powerful teaching. The instrument of shame became the throne of glory. The symbol of defeat became the sign of ultimate victory. 2,000 years later, these 7 last words continue to echo across cultures, languages, and centuries. They remind us that even in humanity's darkest moments, divine love finds a way to speak words of hope, forgiveness, and eternal life. They transform the cross from a symbol of death into a declaration of life, from an emblem of despair into a beacon of hope, from the end of the story into the beginning of salvation itself. The shadow of the cross stretches toward us, no longer a symbol of defeat, but of triumph that changed the world forever.